Assalamu alaikum, everybody, dear friends, dear colleagues. It would have been lovely if I was there with you in Lahore. It has been a long time since we all met together, sat together, or chatted facing each other. But I'm sure you people are enjoying each other's company and this very good and well organized meeting. Uh, Hats off to Dr. Tafazzul, Dr. Aflaq, and his team. So I'll formally start my presentation, which I was given the task to talk about IgG4 related disease, which is a very rare disease. I hope some of you have seen some cases which were diagnosed histopathologically, which is the gold standard for diagnosis of this treatment. So my presentation will go through these titles, these headings. IgG4 related disease, it's a newly recognized systemic immune mediated fibroinflammatory condition which is characterized by tumefactive lesions and fibrosis, which often involves multiple organs at the time of diagnosis or over the period of certain months and years. It is virtually described in every organ system, and histopathologically, the features bear striking similarity across the organs. In this way, it is analogous to sarcoidosis, which that disease present with multiple system involvement, but the histological features are similar in every organ. It has a tendency to form the mass effect, so it can be confused with cancer. Other autoimmune disease can present with higher level of IgG4 level, so it can mimic those conditions as well. So it is sometimes a very big diagnostic dilemma to reach the diagnosis. Uh, so the IgG4 related, it links numerous conditions which were once considered isolated single organ disease, but with time, all of them has been covered under the umbrella of IgG4 related disease. This is the enumeration of some of those diseases. The most studies or most data has been presented in Japan. They have also been able to conduct a nationwide survey which showed the prevalence of this disease of 6 cases per 100,000 a year inhabitant, which is much more than expected. The individuals with the autoimmune pancreatitis, they were found to have a mean age of 67 years at the age of diagnosis. Male to female ratio was 3:1, which is in contrast with other autoimmune disease. When all types of IgG4 related organ involvement were considered, the ratio would a little bit lower, 3:2. Now, the pathogenesis, if we simplify it, the inflammation is driven by the activation of B and T lymphocytes. Uh, excuse me. B and T lymphocyte leading to the oligoclonal production of T cytotoxic lymphocytes and T cell precursors, plasmablast, which lead to the activation of other lymphocytes, macrophages, and causes the production of IgG4 secreting plasma cells and cytokines. This lead to pro-inflammatory cell at the target tissue, and then fibroblast activation and secondary fibrosis, leading to tissue damage and organ dysfunction. This is one of the diagrammatic presentation of that thing. Immunoglobulins, immunological triggers like some allergen, infection, or environmental factor, their presence lead to activation of T cells and B cell, which cause production of many cytokines and activation of oligoclonal expansion of plasmablasts, which further lead to the formation of plasma cell differentiation, increased B regulatory cells. Uh, B cell plasma cell differentiated lead to the formation of IgG4 and other immunoglobulins. When T cells are activated, they produce other cytokines, which in turn further activate B cells and produce further cytokine, which cause IgE production and eosinophilic features can be seen. At the same time, they activate fibroblasts and macrophage activation cells. Macrophage activation happens, which cause fibrosis in the organs. Hypocomplementemia is also observed now. Production of the IgG4 is not an inflammatory thing; it is rather anti-inflammatory, but while activation of T cells, macrophages, and hypercomplementemia are pro-inflammatory. Coming to the clinical manifestation, this disease have a very subacute sort of presentation. It doesn't have stormy onset of the disease, but when the patient comes to you, that might be in the case of emergency or advanced disease. So the patient might need some aggressive management at that time or even surgery. Signs and symptoms may be evident for months or years, but they are very vague and subtle. So the diagnosis is delayed. Patient may complain of weight loss, fever is unusual, fatigue, arthralgia or enthesopathy, or the signs symptoms of the organ involvement. But the frank arthritis is really uncommon. So if there is frank arthritis, other diagnoses should be considered. This diagram shows the organs which are involved. It reminds me of systemic lupus erythematosus, that it doesn't spare any organ. It can affect any organ at any point in time, but most commonly it involves upper airway, skin, cardiovascular, thorax, GIT, and renal involvement with various presentation, which can be the organ involvement or due to mass effect on those organs. I will try to go through individual organ involvement very fast due to shortage of time. The orbit involvement is 4 to the ophthalmic disease is seen in 4 to 12% of the patients. Mostly it is dacroadenitis, that is enlargement of lacrimal gland. Proptosis can be combination of the orbital lesion and pseudotumor that do not affect the lacrimal gland, but inflammation and thickening of the extraocular muscles causing obstruction can create difficulty in differentiation from the ANCA-associated vasculitis. Permanent visual loss can also be there due to optic nerve involvement, due to the pressure on that, or due to lack of blood supply. Nervous system can also be there. Idiopathic hypertrophic meningitis, pachymeningitis is very frequent. Brain parenchyma is usually spared. Hypophysitis can present to the endocrinologist first with the hormonal deficiencies, and the presentation would be according to the hormone that is gone. MRI shows cellular enlargement and thickening of the pituitary stalk. Perineural inflammation and peripheral nerves in the area of orbit, usually trigeminal or infraorbital nerve, can be affected, leading to ptosis or trigeminal neuralgia. A peripheral nerve lesion typically consists of perineural nerves. We can appreciate ptosis in this child. The sala is enlarged. Here we can appreciate the enhancement of the meninges. Salivary gland enlargement, which is one of the prototype of presentation. They can be bilaterally enlarged, but they are persistent and painless. Xerostomia can be seen, which usually respond to immunosuppressions. Ear, nose, throat is frequently involved, and it can cause allergic rhinitis, nasal polyps, chronic sinusitis, nasal obstruction, rhinorrhea. So now we can understand why it is one of the differential diagnoses of the ANCA-associated vasculitis, especially Wegener's or Scherk-Stross, especially when we see eosinophilia and IgE concentrations are levels are higher, especially it can exceed more than 10 times the upper limit. Mass lesion can also be seen in sinuses and destructive lesions, diffuse inflammation of pharynx and surroundings, tracheal inflammation, meaning each and every part of the ENT can be involved. I hope you can appreciate the destruction of the hard palate, and this is some of the surgical device that is used to cover this area. The nasal septum has been perforated in these images. The septum has been eroded, destroyed completely in both the images. Thyroid gland can be involved with thyroidosis, thyroiditis, fibrous variant of Hashimoto thyroiditis, and separate IgG4 related thyroiditis can be seen. You can appreciate the fibrosis in this histopathological feature, this slide. Lymphadenopathy can present in many ways. It can be generalized or localized, but they are usually non-tender. Any group of lymph nodes can be involved individually or simultaneously. But if we want to establish the diagnosis through histopathology or biopsy of the lymph node, that would be really frustrating because they do not go that degree of fibrosis as it is seen in other organs that are involved. Aorta and its branches in the thorax are frequently involved, but they are not usually the presenting symptom. They are incidentally captured through imaging of chest X-ray or vague symptoms when the patient comes with cough or something like that, which is not for the lung disease, for the IgG4 related disease. So when X-rays are done, we show sort of unfolding of aorta, and then imaging and CT scan would show the involvement of the aorta, fibrosis, or even the aneurysm. It can involve obliterative arthritis, can involve medium size or large size vessel aneurysm, and dissection can be seen. Even coronary artery can be involved for the formation of aneurysms. So in adults, it can be one of the differential diagnoses of Kawasaki. So the most common presentation which has been studied is retroperitoneal fibrosis. 31 to 59% of the cases of idiopathic retroperitoneal fibrosis were because of IgG4 related disease. The chronic periodontitis has three components, which include retroperitoneal fibrosis, abdominal aortitis, and perianeurysmal fibrosis. Patient present with vague symptoms of poorly localized pain in back, flank, lower abdomen or thigh, lower extremity edema, and hydronephrosis can be there. And initial imaging might be inconclusive, but later on you can appreciate that a big tumefactive lesion can be seen, which are putting pressure on the vessels and the surrounding tissues and organs. The diagnosis, the disease usually targets three sites, periaortic and arterial lesions involving connective tissue around the abdominal aorta, periurethric area causing urethral obstruction or hydronephrosis, and a plaque-like mass that broadly involves the retroperitoneum. So we can appreciate the hydronephrosis that has happened because of the obstruction of the ureter here. Pulmonary manifestations are observed in 8 to 30% of the patients. They can be asymptomatic, discovered on routine imaging for some other reason, or patient can present with non-specific cough, chest pain, or dyspnea. Imaging are usually non-specific except the finding of paravertebral band, like soft tissue thickening. We can also witness pulmonary nodules, ground glass opacities, pleural thickening, and interstitial lung disease, which are typically non-specific and can also be seen in other forms of connective tissue disease and malignancies as well. Renal manifestation are pretty common. Tubulointerstitial nephritis can be seen, which can present with profound hypocomplementemia, renal enlargement, hypodense lesion, and renal parenchyma on imaging. Proteinuria is usually not very high. Uh, Other form of renal manifestation can be membranous glomerulonephropathy, obstructive nephropathy, and later on advanced renal dysfunction with end-stage renal disease. Even renal atrophy can happen. In pancreas, this is one of the widely studied organ because at first autoimmune pancreatitis was found to have a distinct feature which was not fitting in the types of autoimmune pancreatitis the gastroenterologists usually deal with. They found elevated IgG4 level concentration with it, and we know that there are two types of autoimmune pancreatitis, but IgG4 related disease exists with only type 1. The most common clinical presentation is painless obstructive jaundice with raised IgG4 related levels and associated with sclerosing cholangitis. The other features can be focal pancreatic mass enlarged or enlargement of pancreas without jaundice. Pancreatic insufficiency can present as acute pancreatitis with new or worsened hyperglycemia or aciduria. And in long-standing cases, chronic pancreatitis can be seen, leading to pancreatic atrophy, painless intraductal calcification, pancreatic stones, and even secondary diabetes mellitus. Sclerosing and cholangitis and polycystitis are pretty common. They are frequently seen with type 1 autoimmune pancreatitis. But the other things can also be seen like IgG4 hepatopathy, mass-like lesions in the liver, chronic active hepatitis with eosinophilic infiltrates, and IgG4 related polycystitis is reported in 25 to 30% patients, and they appear with diffuse wall thickening on imaging. Alimentary canal can also be involved in the form of ulcers, polypoid lesions, submucosal masses, and wall thickening. Eosinophilic esophagitis and gastritis can be seen. Sclerosing mesenteritis can be very devastating if it merges with retroperitoneal fibrosis, leading to encasement of vital organs and causing the urgent need of the surgical resection. Other feature can be fibrosing mediastinitis, skin diseases can be there with erythematous plaques, and benign prostatic hypertrophy can be one of the features. Now, all these things we come across with in our routine life, but from now on, we should consider IgG4 related disease as well in such patients. Yes, IgG4 related disease can be there in pediatric population. In one of the studies, they have selected 740 articles, out of which they found 25 cases of children with IgG4 related disease, and they were almost all of them were histologically proven. The mean age of the children was 13 years, and 64% were girls, which is in contrast with the adult population. 44% had orbital disease, 12% had autoimmune pancreatitis, 8% had cholangitis or pulmonary disease, and rest of them had other manifestations like lymphadenopathy, etc. These are some of the diseases which can mimic IgG4 related disease. Initially, some of them we have to rule out some of and most of them through different investigation, clinical history, examination, and even biopsy. So as with other diseases, clinical history and thorough physical examination along with lab testing imaging is most important way of diagnosis. And if it is coupled with histopathological examination, then we will be able to reach the accurate diagnosis of the IgG4 related disease. The laboratory findings are usually elevated IgG4 related disease, IgG4 levels, but the studies and the data have shown that these levels cannot be very high, and it can be increased in some other conditions like autoimmune diseases, asthma, allergies, plasma cell dysplasias, malignancies like lymphomas and pancreatic adenocarcinoma, while in patients who have got biopsy proven IgG4 related disease, their levels can be low or normal. But in one study, the specificity and positive predictive value was very good if the levels are high. Usually, the patient who have got involvement of multiple organs, they show high levels of IgG4 related disease. IgG4 level concentration. These are some of the labs which are recommended and their associated finding, like IgG4 level, if it is more than 135 and IgG4 to IgG ratio is more than 10%, then it is highly suggestive of IgG4 related disease in the presence of specific clinical scenario. Peripheral eosinophilia, raised IgE level, IgE levels can be seen. CRP and ESR are usually normal until and unless there is an associated infection or inflammation like aortitis, etc. ANA and rheumatoid factor can be positive in low titers, hypocomplementemia, especially with renal disease. Increased number of circulating plasmablasts by flow cytometry is very much suggestive of the, and it is a it is more sensitive biomarker than IgG4 concentration for the disease activity in IgG4 related disease. Especially their level also tend to fall down with the treatment. So when the patient comes with different symptoms, they already have gone through different sort of imaging, maybe a plain radiological X-rays and ultrasound, and on the when the suspicion is raised, CT scan or MRI of that affected area has also been done. But we know that it involves multiple organs. The presenting symptom might be related to one organ only, but it can be the other symptoms might also be involved, but not showing any symptoms right now. So a thorough imaging of chest and abdomen is necessary for the assessment of disease activity at the time of diagnosis. Some studies have shown good results with PET scan, and its effectiveness in diagnostic utility has been shown with its ability to identify active inflammatory lesion, enabling a delineation of disease extent. And there are certain imaging findings, but we know that it is very costly and not easily available. So using it for the diagnosis and then monitoring of the treatment would be pretty expensive. Uh, there are some imaging findings that can be characteristic for the diagnosis or suggestive for the IgG4 related disease. For example, symmetric bilateral involvement of salivary gland, lacrimal enlargement, bronchovascular or septal thickening, orbital myositis, pancreas enlargement, patchy thickness of aorta, retroperitoneal lesions, bilateral renal cortex low density area. So if some of these findings are present on PET scan, then they are highly suggestive of IgG4 related disease. Now, the gold standard for the diagnosis of this disease is histopathology. It is mandatory once you suspect the diagnosis and you have ruled out other conditions, or you are trying to rule out the other conditions, then histology will be of great help. So the hallmark of this condition are three findings: dense lymphoplasmacytic infiltrate rich in IgG4 positive cells. This and matches with an irregularly whorled fibrotic process that is termed as storiform fibrosis, obliterative phlebitis resulting in destruction of the venous lumen. So according to the consensus statement of the pathology, if two out of these three are present, then it is highly suggestive for IgG4 related disease. But we can also find obliterative arteritis and eosinophilic infiltration in many organs. But if we see granuloma, neutrophilic infiltration, necrosis, then alternative diagnosis should be considered, and it goes against IgG4 related disease. If you are able to get immunostaining for IgG4, then it would be very much helpful to reach the diagnosis. An increase in the number of IgG4 positive plasma cells per HPF and an elevated IgG4 positive, IgG positive plasma cell ratio, it can support the diagnosis of IgG4 related disease and make your life easier. Um, this is the slide showing diffuse lymphocytic infiltration with patchy fibrosis, and the immunohistochemical staining showing IgG4 plasma cells diffusely present in the slide. This slide is trying to show the obliteration of the vessel lumen, while this vessel is pretty good. And due to this infiltrate, the whole vessel is occluded. Later on, storiform fibrosis can be seen, appreciated in this condition. So the diagnosis is not often very straightforward. We have to follow multi-step approach and clinical involvement of one organ, later on other organ can be there. To make our life easy, the researchers have been working on different criteria so that we can reach the diagnosis much easily as compared to now. So the step-up approach would be history and physical examination. If there is suspicion of IgG4 related disease, IgG4 level higher on site, if possible, flow cytometry to find the level of plasmablast and IgG4 and IgG ratio. If still suspicion is there, imaging would be helpful, whichever imaging is available in your part of the town or country. Storiform fibrosis, obliterative phlebitis, or plasma cell infiltration or histopathology. If all these things are pointing towards the same direction than IgG4 related disease, the most probable diagnosis in this case. So different researcher has been working on the criteria. This was the criteria proposed or is in practice for autoimmune pancreatitis. It is a very tedious and very detailed criteria. Similarly, there is a criteria for renal involvement, and they have a very great algorithm for it as well, although it is very detailed, but this algorithm is will make our life a little bit easier. Finally, in 2009, ACR ULAR has published the classification criteria for IgG4 related disease. This is the first set of international classification criteria and has multiple step approach, and it's a very detailed and thorough criteria. There is entry criteria, exclusion criteria, and inclusion criteria, and finally it is score based. So you have to have a score of more than 20 points in the inclusion criteria, then you would be like 98, and it is 98% specific and 82% sensitive, which is pretty amazing. The exclusion criteria include different aspect of the disease like clinical, serological, radiological, pathological, and at the same time you have to rule out some specific diseases. If they are not there, then you can proceed to the inclusion criteria. It also include a lot of things, a lot of features which should be there, and so how do we apply this criteria? It is a step-up approach. The entry criteria is the characteristic clinical or radiological involvement of a typical organ or pathological evidence of inflammatory process accompanied with lymphoplasmacytic infiltrate of unknown etiology. If it is there, then you can include this patient in the or you can apply this criteria on this patient. Then you go through the exclusion criteria. If there is any one of the exclusion criteria positive, then this patient is not the case of IgG4 related disease. And if there is a big no, then you can proceed to inclusion criteria, which have given points depending upon the presence or the finding of uh, uh, different conditions related to this disease. Immunostaining, serum IG4 concentration, lacrimal gland involvement, lacrimal carotids, and other lingual and submandibular gland involvement, chest finding, pancreatic biliary tree involvement, kidney, retroperitoneum. All these findings have been given certain points. And finally, we add those points. And if the patient meets the entry criteria, there is no exclusion criteria, and the total points are more than or equal to 20, then this patient is suffering from IgG4 related disease, most probably. There are no universal biomarker to monitor the IgG4 related disease activity. So multiple researchers have reported that there is correlation between plasmablast level, cytotoxicity, lymphocyte population, and changes in the PET-CT with the level of activity or key activity of the disease in response to treatment. But this relationship needs to be established with more study and more research. When we come to the treatment, so the mainstay of the treatment is glucocorticoid, which has been used since the beginning, even when they were labeled as individual isolated diseases. So the patient is usually started on 0.6 milligram per kg per day, and they start to taper it off after a month. Usually the 93% of the patients receive some response, maybe partial or complete, and after later on, we can put the patient on maintenance dose of 7 milligram per day. But all of us know that there are a lot of side effects of glucocorticoid, and we do not want our patient to be on glucocorticoid for longer period of time. So a lot of DMARDs have been tried with different results. Azathioprine showed some results, but but very good results were seen with cyclophosphamide, especially in patients who had multiple organ involvement, and the patient received 88% remission at 12 months. Igratimod, it is an anti-inflammatory molecule present in China and showing effect of the anti-inflammatory path, anti-TNF pathway with other cytokine, interleukin 6 and tocilizumab. I don't know, when I read this thing, I thought whether we can use the infliximab or etanercept in this condition. God knows, we do not have studies related to that. So the study was of very small period, 24 weeks, and showed very good response in 88% patient, and the safety was pretty well. Leflunomide with limited period of time. Methotrexate showed good results in patients who did not have very extensive disease. Mycophenolate mofetil, this was the only drug which has a randomized controlled trial and did show very good response in combination with glucocorticoids. Rituximab has been very effective in patients who had multiple organ involvement, and especially the patients who had elevated baseline IgG4 levels showed significant reduction in the disease in the parameter, and also the disease control was pretty much was better than the other DMARDs. This is the updated proposal for IgG4 related disease treatment. If the patient is asymptomatic, then uh, no treatment or strict follow-up if there are some symptoms, but no urgent organ dysfunction like aortitis, retroperitoneal fibrosis, or as such, and there is absence of relapse predictor factor, meaning elevated IgE, IgG4 level, eosinophilia, or the relapse index is more than 9. Then you can start low dose steroid, 1.5 to 0.6 milligram for 1 month, and then start tapering and keep the maintenance dose for 1 to 3 years. But if these relapse predictor and urgent organ dysfunction, if these relapse predictor are there with symptom, then we should add another disease modifying therapy depending upon the patient's comfort and experience and availability. And if the patient has got symptom, if there is urgent organ dysfunction, then recommended rituximab, 2 doses of rituximab along with steroids for the better results. As we know that these conditions can produce obstructive or ineffective lesions, therefore intervention procedures or surgeries might be needed, including urethral stenting, USS, urethral intraperitonealization, endoscopic biliary stenting to make the patient comfortable. In one study, rather 2 or 3 studies, there was increased incidence of malignancy in patients with IgG4 related autoimmune pancreatitis or sclerosing cholangitis. 50% patient had relapsed, and 11% out of 150, 11% patient out of 115 showed the incidence of malignancy. While the cancer risk was found 15 out of 808 in another study, and there was increased risk of non-Hodgkin lymphoma as well. So, if we are treating a patient with IgG4 related disease, we should keep our eyes open so that we do not miss this condition. I thank you all, and thank you the organizer and the convener for asking me to present a talk about such a rare disease. It gave me an opportunity to go through the literature and all the features and about this disease in detail. And I thank you all. See you somewhere someday, inshallah. Allah Hafiz.